All right, so get this. 9 out of every 10 new cars sold are electric.
Sounds pretty futuristic, right? Well, that's happening right now. Over in Norway.
Yeah.
In this deep dive, we're going to unpack how Norway went from gas guzzlers to electric dreams. We've got an awesome article from Electric,
Great source.
the go-to source for all things EV. And we've got a lively Reddit discussion from Renergy, where people are, shall we say, passionately sharing their opinions
Oh, yeah.
on Norway's EV journey.
It's a fascinating case study. It really challenges a lot of the assumptions that I think we all have about EV adoption.
Yeah, I think that's what's so cool about it. It's like all those worries that we had maybe a few years ago about EVs like running out of juice in the middle of nowhere,
Right.
or whether the power grid can handle a nation of electric cars. Norway's like, nah, we got this figured out.
Exactly.
And here's one little thing from that Electric article. It just blew my mind. The main buyer of gas-powered cars in Norway these days, rental car companies.
Oh, wow.
And guess who they're renting them to? Tourists.
Wow. It's like a time warp. I know. It's like stepping back in time when you see a gas-powered rental cruising around in a sea of electric vehicles.
Yeah. Really highlights how quickly the landscape is shifting. What was once this cutting-edge technology is now becoming the norm.
Totally. Okay, so let's dive into the numbers. Electric reports that a staggering 88.9% of new car sales in Norway in 2024 were fully electric. Add in plug-in hybrids, and we're talking over 90% of new cars rolling off the lot with a plug.
Yeah, that's not just impressive, it's record-breaking.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that this didn't happen overnight. This is something that Norway has been really strategically working on for over a decade.
So what did they do? Did they just start handing out free Teslas?
Not quite. On every street corner.
But their approach was definitely multifaceted. I mean, they've implemented a whole suite of policies and incentives designed to make owning an EV significantly more attractive than owning a gas-powered car.
Okay.
One big thing was they slashed the taxes on EV purchases. So you can imagine that made them much more affordable compared to their gas-guzzling counterparts. Oh, so it's like a financial nudge in the right direction?
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't stop there. They also provided really generous subsidies for people to install charging stations,
Oh, okay.
whether that was at home, at work, or even at the grocery store. They wanted to make it so convenient
That makes sense.
for people to charge their EVs.
Yeah. If it's cheaper to buy and there are charging stations everywhere, it starts to feel like a no-brainer.
Exactly. And it's worth noting that this approach is actually, it aligns with a classic pattern of technology adoption,
Oh, yeah.
known as the S-curve.
Okay, I've heard of that.
Initially, you have early adopters, and adoption is slow. But then there's a period of rapid acceleration
Right.
as the technology becomes more mainstream and more affordable.
Right.
And then finally, you reach this point of near universal adoption.
So it sounds like Norway's on that final stretch of the S-curve where EVs have gone from being this niche choice to the dominant force on the roads.
Exactly. And what I think is remarkable is that they've managed to achieve all of this without experiencing any major hiccups along the way.
Wait, really? No grid meltdowns, no nationwide charging station shortages?
Nope. Their grid has handled the increased demand from all these electric vehicles just fine.
Really?
And as for charging stations, they've built out their infrastructure so effectively that range anxiety is becoming a thing of the past in Norway.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Especially when you think about how many people were skeptical about whether EVs could even handle cold weather. But Norway, with its often frigid winters, they seem to have debunked that myth.
Absolutely. In fact, the Reddit thread we're looking at mentions a story about this long line of Teslas at a Swedish ski resort during a holiday rush.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Some people saw it as a sign of like EV charging chaos,
Mm-hmm.
but others pointed out that it was likely due to a combination of factors, including some temporary gas shortages
Yeah.
and just the holiday rush itself,
Yeah.
not some inherent limitation of EVs.
Right, not an EV meltdown.
Exactly.
It is interesting to see how people's perceptions of EVs are still evolving, even in a place like Norway where they're so common.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another point that came up in that Reddit discussion. Norway relies very heavily on hydropower
Okay.
for its electricity generation,
Right.
which makes their EV transition even more impressive from a sustainability standpoint.
Yes, their clean energy sources are definitely a big part of their success story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
However, some Reddit users also pointed out that Norway still produces a significant amount of oil,
Oh, right.
and they provide oil subsidies to its citizens. So while they're leading the charge in EV adoption, they're not completely free from fossil fuel dependence.
That's a good point. It's like a reminder that even countries that are making major strides towards sustainability are still grappling with these complexities. It's not a simple black and white situation.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this picture of Norway as like this EV utopia. But I'm curious, are there any downsides to all of this? The Reddit thread mentions some concerns from taxi drivers about range anxiety and the long charging times. Is there any truth to that?
It's true that those were valid concerns with some of the older EV models. However, newer battery technology has dramatically increased range and reduced charging times.
Gotcha.
We're now seeing EVs that can travel hundreds of miles on a single charge, and some can be charged up to 80% in less than 20 minutes.
Wow, that's a game changer. So those taxi drivers might need to update their talking points.
Indeed. And let's not forget the role of heat pumps, which have also significantly improved EV performance in cold weather,
Oh, right.
mitigating range loss and ensuring that even in Norway's harsh winters, EVs are a viable option.
It seems like they've really thought of everything.
Well, they've certainly been very thorough in their approach,
Mm-hmm.
and the changes aren't just happening on the roads.
Oh,
That electric article mentions that gas stations in Norway are actually becoming a rare sight.
wow.
Circle K, their biggest gas station chain.
I've been there.
They plan to have as many charges as gas pumps within the next 3 years.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow. It's like a symbol of the future?
it really is. It speaks volumes about the level of commitment from both the government and the private sector in Norway.
Okay, so we've seen the data, we've heard about the policies, and we've even gotten a glimpse of what the future holds for gas stations in Norway. But I'm curious, what's the reaction from the rest of the world? Are people looking at Norway as a model for their own EV transition?
That's a great question, and it's one that's sparking a lot of discussion, particularly in that Reddit thread.
Yeah, I mean, some people might be thinking, well, Norway is this small, wealthy country with a unique set of circumstances. Can a country like the United States, with its vast distances and sprawling infrastructure, really replicate Norway's success? What do you think?
That's a valid concern, and it's one that we'll definitely explore further in just a moment.
Sure.
But before we jump ahead, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned so far. What stands out to you about Norway's EV revolution?
You know what stands out to me is the sheer scale and speed of their transformation. I mean, they've managed to shift from a gas-powered society to an electric one in what feels like the blink of an eye, and they've done it in a way that seems both comprehensive and sustainable. It's truly remarkable.
I agree. It's a testament to what's possible when there's a clear vision, strong political will, and the willingness to embrace these new technologies.
Mm.
But as you mentioned, the question of replicability is a crucial one,
Yeah.
and it's one that we'll delve into next.
All right, so we've laid the groundwork. We've gotten a taste of what Norway's EV revolution is all about. But there's so much more to explore, and I'm eager to unpack the lessons, the challenges, and the potential for the rest of the world.
Stay tuned, because in the next part of our deep dive, we'll delve into those very questions.
Can't wait. Welcome back. So we've established that Norway is basically the EV champion of the world right now. But can the rest of us keep up? I mean, some of those Reddit users had some pretty strong opinions about whether countries like the United States could ever pull off what Norway has done.
Yeah, there's definitely some healthy skepticism out there.
Yeah.
And for good reason. Norway has some unique advantages that have made their EV transition smoother, like their abundance of hydropower,
Right.
which makes their electricity grid exceptionally clean.
Right. Their electricity is already pretty green, so switching to EVs is even more impactful for them in terms of reducing emissions. But what about those who say, hey, my country is massive? Norway's tiny. We can't just build charging stations everywhere.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
Scaling up EV infrastructure in a geographically diverse country like the United States presents its own set of challenges. But let's not forget that Norway itself isn't exactly a flat, compact country.
That's true.
They have mountains, fjords, and vast stretches of rural areas.
So they've had to figure out how to make EVs work in all sorts of challenging terrains and climates. That's pretty encouraging. But what about the argument that Americans are just too attached to their gas-guzzling trucks and SUVs? Can we really expect people to give up their beloved vehicles for something electric?
That's where I think we need to consider the power of market forces and technological advancements. The electric article highlights how rapidly battery technology is evolving. We're seeing electric trucks and SUVs hitting the market with impressive ranges and capabilities that rival their gas-powered counterparts.
So it's not just about tiny electric cars anymore. We're talking about electric vehicles that can handle heavy-duty tasks and long-distance travel. That changes the game, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And as these electric options become more widely available and more affordable, I think we'll see a natural shift in consumer preferences,
Mm,
especially as gas prices continue to fluctuate and concerns about climate change become more prominent.
right. It's not just about the cool factor of driving an electric vehicle. It's also about the economic and environmental benefits. But let's get back to those skeptical Reddit users for a moment. Some of them were worried about the strain on the power grid if everyone switched to EVs. Is that a legitimate concern?
It's definitely something that needs to be addressed, but I wouldn't say it's an insurmountable obstacle. Norway has demonstrated that with smart grid management and strategic investments in renewable energy sources, a nation can handle the increased electricity demand from EVs.
Okay, so it's not just about plugging in more cars. It's about making sure the grid itself is ready for the electric revolution. What about the environmental impact of all those EV batteries? Some people are concerned about the mining of raw materials and the eventual disposal of those batteries.
That's an important consideration, and it's one that the industry is actively working to address. There's been a lot of progress in developing more sustainable battery technologies using recycled materials and improving battery recycling processes.
So it's not just about switching to EVs, it's about ensuring that the entire life cycle of these vehicles, from production to disposal, is as environmentally friendly as possible.
Exactly, and that's where government regulations and industry initiatives play a crucial role.
Okay, so we've tackled some of the big concerns about replicating Norway's success. But let's switch gears for a moment and talk about something that came up in both the electric article and the Reddit discussion: the role of government in promoting EV adoption.
Yes. This is where we see a range of perspectives. From those who applaud Norway's aggressive policies and incentives to those who are wary of government overreach and prefer a more market-driven approach.
Right. The electric article seems pretty enthusiastic about government intervention, praising Norway's tax breaks, subsidies, and infrastructure investments.
And to be fair, those policies have clearly been instrumental in Norway's success. They've created a favorable environment for EV adoption, making it easier and more affordable for people to make the switch.
But then you have those Reddit users who are like, hold on, too much government involvement can stifle innovation and distort the market. Where do you stand on this debate?
It's a complex issue, and I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer. Each country needs to find its own balance, taking into account its unique political and economic landscape.
So it's not necessarily about copying Norway's playbook exactly. It's about learning from their experience and adapting the strategies to fit different contexts.
Precisely. And it's important to remember that government policies are just one piece of the puzzle. Consumer demand, technological advancements, and private sector investments are all crucial drivers of EV adoption.
Right. It's a multifaceted challenge that requires a collaborative effort. But I'm curious, what about those Reddit users who argued that the United States is just too politically divided to implement a cohesive national strategy for EV adoption? Do you think that's a valid concern?
It's certainly a factor to consider. Political gridlock can be a major impediment to progress on any issue, especially one as complex as transitioning to a new transportation paradigm.
So how do we overcome that? Do you need to wait for some magical moment of political unity before we can make any real headway on EVs?
I don't think we need to wait for a perfect alignment of the stars. In fact, we're already seeing progress happening at the state and local levels, even in places where there might be resistance at the national level.
Aw, so it's not all doom and gloom. Even if there are roadblocks at the federal level, there's still momentum building from the ground up.
Exactly. And I think that's an important takeaway from Norway's experience. Their success didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process built on a foundation of consistent policies, strategic investments, and a growing public acceptance of EVs.
So it's about taking a long-term perspective, building momentum, and creating a positive feedback loop where each step forward makes the next step easier.
Precisely. And I think that's where the power of stories and examples like Norway's comes in. It shows people what's possible, inspires them to imagine a different future, and encourages them to take action, even if it's on a small scale.
Right, because sometimes all it takes is a spark of inspiration to ignite a movement. And speaking of sparks, I have to admit, all this talk about EVs is making me want to trade in my gas guzzler. But before I make any rash decisions, I'm curious to hear your final thoughts on what we can learn from Norway's experience.
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that a transition to a more sustainable transportation future is not only possible, but achievable. Norway has demonstrated that with the right combination of vision, commitment, and innovation, we can overcome the challenges and create a world where electric vehicles are the norm, not the exception.
That's a powerful message, and one that I think we all need to hear. But as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listener with a question to ponder. If you could wave a magic wand and implement one policy or initiative in your own country to accelerate EV adoption, what would it be and why?
It's a thought-provoking question, and one that I hope will spark some creative thinking and meaningful conversations as we continue to navigate this exciting journey towards a more electric future.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been on quite a journey exploring Norway's EV revolution, haven't we?
We certainly have. And I think we've uncovered some valuable insights into what it takes to make a successful transition to electric mobility.
Absolutely. From their innovative policies and strategic investments to their commitment to building out a robust charging infrastructure, Norway has really set the bar high for the rest of the world. But before we wrap up our deep dive, I wanted to touch on one more aspect of Norway's EV success that I found particularly intriguing: the cultural shift that seems to have accompanied their technological transformation.
That's a fascinating point. It's not just about having the right cars or the right infrastructure. It's about having a society that embraces and supports the transition to electric mobility.
Exactly. And I got the sense from both the electric article and the Reddit discussion that there's a real sense of pride in Norway about being an EV leader. It's almost like they've become a symbol of what's possible when a nation commits to a more sustainable future.
I think you're right. There's a palpable sense of collective purpose and national identity tied to their EV success. It's not just about reducing emissions. It's about being at the forefront of a global movement towards cleaner, more sustainable transportation.
And that cultural shift seems to be reflected in everything from their advertising and marketing campaigns to their public discourse about EVs. It's not just about the practical benefits. It's about appealing to people's values and aspirations.
Precisely. They've managed to create a narrative around EVs that resonates with Norwegians on a deeper level.
Mm.
It's about being innovative, forward-thinking, and responsible stewards of the environment.
And that's something that I think other countries can learn from as they embark on their own EV journeys. It's not just about implementing the right policies or building the right infrastructure. It's about fostering a cultural environment where people are excited about embracing electric mobility.
Absolutely. It's about making EVs aspirational,
Yeah.
not just practical. And that's where storytelling, public engagement, and showcasing the benefits of EVs in a way that resonates with people's values can be incredibly powerful.
Right. It's about tapping into that emotional connection and making people feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's something that Norway has done remarkably well. They've managed to create a sense of shared ownership and national pride around their EV revolution.
Well, I have to say, I'm feeling pretty inspired by Norway's example. It's a reminder that transformative change is possible even when it comes to something as deeply ingrained as our transportation systems.
I agree. It's a beacon of hope and a testament to human ingenuity and determination. And it shows us that with the right combination of vision, commitment, and collaboration, we can create a future where electric mobility is the norm, not the exception.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Norway's EV revolution, I want to leave you with one final thought. Imagine yourself in a future where electric vehicles are as commonplace as gas-powered cars are today. What does that world look like? What are the sights, the sounds, the smells of that electric future? And perhaps most importantly, how does it feel to be a part of that world? Thanks for joining us on this electrifying exploration.